HB336 and recognizes Representative Schofield to explain his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. I have a little trepidation today because before this session, subcommittees were where bills went to die. And I definitely need you to pass this one. Subcommittees this session were created with a little more intentionality that they would be a place for members to work on bills. And I want to take a minute to explain the background of this one because this is a world most of you do not live in. In Harris County, there are over 2 million people who live in unincorporated Harris County. They do not have a mayor or a council, and they don't have a police department. Over the years, of course, that portion of the county has grown, so that 40 years ago or so, we created the Contract Deputy Program, which provides policing to those areas out in the, what were then, out in the suburbs. You could leave Houston in those days and drive and drive and drive and eventually see rice dryers and know you were approaching Katy. Today, there is not a single undeveloped piece of property that I can think of between Houston and Katy. The city has come out to meet us, and so have all the city problems that come with it and the need for police protection. So the Contract Deputy Program was created to allow those neighborhoods to pay to help subsidize their police service. Now, don't forget this. They pay taxes to the county. They are entitled to get public safety from the county in exchange for their tax dollars. But as the suburban areas burgeoned, it was next to impossible to provide them with a level of public safety that would be adequate to protect them from crime. And so we allowed them, the legislature, allowed them to enter into contracts that would provide for this. And we did it as we do everything at the county level through the county. The problem is, in the last couple of years, Harris County has tried to do everything they can to eliminate this program. And one of the things that they tried to do was to make it where the locals who already pay county taxes to get public safety would have to pay 100% of the cost of the policing in their neighborhoods, or they couldn't have a contract. Historically, it's actually been 70%. So they would pay 70% of the cost of the patrols, and they would get 70% of the contract deputy's time. And in fact, the county judge herself, when was questioned about this when was questioning the county auditor, who said, "We're subsidizing them out there." Again, you're supposed to be providing all of our public safety, but say we're subsidizing them by paying 30% of it. She even said in Commissioner's Court, they're paying for 70%, they're getting 70%, how are we subsidizing them? But be that as it may, the reality has been over the decades that you are not going to get police coverage out in the unincorporated areas if you don't have a contract. As a result of this, a decade ago when I first took office, there were over 300 contracts, 300. The constables had 200 and the sheriff had 100. And one of the best parts of this program is both the sheriffs and the constables participate. If your neighborhood doesn't feel like they're getting a good deal from, say, the sheriff's office, they can cancel the contract and sign with the constable, which has happened in the past. But the crisis that we're coming to now, as we, again, have crossed 2 million people in the unincorporated areas, is we have rampant crime in some of these areas with no way to cover for it unless you contract for it. I can tell you my house has been broken into twice in the last several years, and it's only because we had constables under contract for our neighborhood that I was able to get quick service, people were on top of it, and folks realized they couldn't just break into every house. There are a couple things I want to mention about this bill. One is this bill that we're hearing today, as opposed to the one that was originally said, is bracketed at $1 million. I have an intention to raise the bracket to $3.3 million. The reason for that is, and by the way, some of these services are provided within city limits. There are neighborhoods in the city of Houston that also have a contract. Predominantly, my concern is with the unincorporated areas. The second largest county and the third largest county don't have a lot of that at the moment. Now, you know the way a bracket works, you can grow into it if it's a population bracket. If Dallas or Tarrant County were to get to the point where they had that many people, they would have had to stuff their unincorporated areas full of people, and then they would end up with the same problem that we have. It seems very unlikely anytime soon, but I thought that was an important point to mention. Secondly, we're only to testify about bills before us, so I only will, but I will point out that I filed a similar bill on Friday that increases the number of entities that can contract with the sheriffs and the constables. In the current draft of the bill, I only have homeowners associations and one other similar entity, and that's who does most of them. But MUDs, and again, for those of you who don't live in my world, if you live in an unincorporated area and you don't have a police department, you also don't have water and sewer. So we create separate special purpose districts called MUDs, municipal utility districts, that provide those services. They end up standing in the place of a city for almost everything but police in a lot of these areas, and particularly in North Texas, where they insisted that they have road powers and things like that. So in a lot of cases, the MUD actually wants to enter into a contract. I had a business, a major businessman in Houston, who didn't want to be identified because I think he's afraid of retaliation, who said they asked for a contract and were told no. And so you'll hear from the county, we've never voted one down. Oh no, they don't vote one down. The county staff tells you you're not going to get one. So that never gets to the commissioners to actually vote no on these contracts. But I just cannot stress to you enough, and I'm sorry, I don't want to take up your whole morning. Without public safety, nothing else we do as a government matters. And I have 2 million people out in my area, including 200,000 in my district, who would have no police coverage at all if they can't contract with the contract deputy program, be it the county sheriff or the constable. And we are at the point now where they effectively live in a city in all but name. They have all the city problems, they have all the city traffic, they're starting to get all the city crime. And if you tell them you have to pay 100% of this program or you can't have it, they won't have any policing. And they already pay taxes for public safety. So members, you're going to hear from 2 constables' offices today. One of them, Harris County Constable 4, to outline the breadth of the problem. Harris County Constable 4's department is the 11th largest police department in the state of Texas. That's how many people they have to serve, because of the fact that we don't have any other policing solutions for unincorporated Harris County. So I'm, like you, I'm going to sit and enjoy the witness testimony, and then I will be back up to close because I think I'll probably have some counterpoints to make. And with that, any questions?
All right, thank you. Members, any of you have questions for Representative Schofield? Representative Swainer.
Thank you so much, Chair Speller, and thank you for being here today, Representative Schofield. Why aren't some of these communities just incorporating if they're that dense and have those policing needs?
You want to know the real answer to that? It's got nothing to do with Harris County, it's the city of Houston. Over the years, before we ended forced annexation, the city of Houston came out with what they call strip annexation. I call it finger annexation, and you can imagine which finger. And they would send a finger out to an area and grab a tax rateable. So if you built a shopping mall, they would grab it, so all the money would go there. In the, one of my brand new community built a shopping area called the Boardwalk. They reached out and grabbed it. As a result of that, there aren't enough tax rateables for a lot of these areas to be able to incorporate. You'd only have houses. And if you ever tried to run a city on the taxes you get just from houses, it's not going to be possible. So it is going to be, and that's a terrific question because it's one of the things I've been focusing on since I got here. I like to say that some of these areas that are 30 miles from Houston would like to see their mayor in the HEB and not on television, but it is probably not in our lifetime, and you're a lot younger than me, probably not in our lifetime will any of these areas be able to incorporate.
Other question is, I'm a little confused because you've said these areas have no policing. Most of the county I live is unincorporated, and even a lot of our smaller cities don't have a police force. But we have regular policing by the sheriff. Why isn't this something that's happening just through normal tax rate dynamics and instead?
Partially because the county has emphasized other areas rather than public safety, and partially because the growth in those unincorporated areas has just outstripped anybody's ability to provide it. And so if you were to, I always read the bills before my committees. I don't hold other people to that because it's kind of a crazy use of your time, and then committee subs come out anyway. But if you had read this bill before you came in here, it looks like I'm creating a new program. It enables them to do this. I want to emphasize they've been doing this since the 1980s. What this does, what the bill actually does in law, would be to statutorily authorize the constables and the sheriffs to enter into these contracts so the county can't tell them no. And then they would keep the money that is used for it because they then take that money and that's what they hire the deputy with. So your contract in your subdivision, you may have a smaller subdivision than mine, you might contract for 2 deputies. There's something like $93,000 apiece. So you'd pay 70% of $93,000 for each of 2. My subdivision might be bigger, we might want 3, and we pay for 70% of 3 deputies. And so over the course of time, that's sort of how this has all developed as they didn't incorporate out there and as the growth has been unbelievable. I mean, I'll tell you, we all lived through redistricting.
You don't have to lecture me about rapid growth.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
with
I mean,
you. I'm with
you've
you.
seen, my district grew from, when we drew it, it was 200,000 people. Before we even had an election in it, it was 221,000. I had an 11% growth before we could even hold an election. And so we are just rapidly populating. And to their credit, the sheriffs and the constables are trying their best. They'll cover you as best they can. But under this program, the coverage is so quick, and they'll tell you when they get up here, they're able to get there in a couple of minutes, which even in the city of Houston, the city police department can't do. And the other thing I want to point out about this, even though we're out there, when you have a contract deputy, you don't get sort of whoever's on duty, you get your person. They develop an understanding of your neighborhood. They know it's like having a beat cop, except they're in a car. And after a while, they know, okay, that's just the kids. They're just doing what they do. That person's case in this place because they're not usually here and we've never seen them before. You get that kind of level of service that in an unincorporated area you would never get without this program.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying, well, so first of all, like what percentage of the neighborhoods in the unincorporated area currently have these or are pursuing these? Do you know?
They can tell you better than I've seen maps that show the coverage, and it's a lot of them. The other, and again, there are some that are actually in the city of Houston that will still get it because they want, they want extra patrols and they kind of want to be safer. And there are, it's sort of the nature of a city that things evolve and places that used to be safer aren't as safe as they used to be. And so some of them will actually contract, I think largely with the sheriff. I could be wrong. They might contract with the constables too. But it's, like I say, I don't want to say it's unique, but we get a lot of the problems before even other large counties do because we grew fast first. And so when you start putting 2 million people in an area where you can't get that coverage unless you pay extra for it. We'll just be frank. I used to hate this program. When I first took office, I'm like, why do my people have to pay extra to get what they paid for in their taxes? And the truth is, there's no way they could cover them if they didn't. And my neighborhoods are happy to do it. They can't wait they get to pick between the sheriff and the constable, whichever one they think will be more responsive. They know that they're going to have this person and that person patrolling their neighborhood, and they're going to know who it is. They love the program, and if you price them out of it, which I believe was intentional, the county will say it's fiscal. If you price them out of it, they're not going to have coverage like that. They may be lucky to have coverage at all.
Yeah, I guess some of what I sort of have this gut struggle with, there's this idea of, all men and women equal under the law. And it feels a little strange to me when people can effectively buy better police coverage than other people in the same entity. And I mean, do you have any of that discomfort?
And I think you'll hear from these folks, it's actually the poorer neighborhoods that are clamoring for it more because they have higher crime rates. And also the other thing that I've noticed and I've been told by residents of neighborhoods, in neighborhoods that don't have it, if the neighborhood next to you have it, your crime rate goes down because there are cop cars around. And so between and you can ask, I have the constable for my precinct, Precinct 5 is here, and the chief of constable Precinct 4, which as I told you is the 11th largest police force in the state. They can tell you all that. You can ask them all of that, and they can explain to you the types of neighborhoods that get covered, the types of neighborhoods that benefit most from it, where they tend to be. They know all that stuff in depth.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Lowe.
Hi, thank you. So when I first read this bill this morning, I thought it was a new program. So I want to first thank you for clarifying that they're already doing it. My question to you is for the unincorporated areas that don't have any police coverage. Let's say there is an actual emergency. who actually responds to these?
These same folks. If you have, if you pay for 70% of a constable's time or a sheriff's deputy's time, and you have an emergency, they'll leave there and go to where you are. And plus, there are some regular patrols, but yeah, they will leave where they are to go where you are.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a
Chairman
question.
Tepper.
So if it's not incorporated or not a neighborhood association, can you still contract for these services? And how do you organize just a group of property owners?
It's interesting that you mention that. As I said, when I drafted House Bill 3, when I had it drafted, because I write a lot of my bills, I didn't write this one, and it had homeowners associations in a different entity, I did file a different bill that explicitly is broader and that allows other entities, just about anybody who wants to enter into these contracts, because it shouldn't matter if, most of unincorporated Harris County is covered by MUDs, but not all. Most have homeowners associations, but not all. And so a different bill would make it clearer. And I didn't want to add them to this bill for fear of point of order. If you make it broader, I didn't want it to get killed at the dais. But yes, there are other entities that would want to enter into these contracts.
Why did you bracket to such large counties? Could smaller counties not participate?
I filed two versions of the bill. The original one that was set didn't have a bracket. And the reason why I filed this bill that I'm testifying on right now with the bracket was that what we were hearing from even fairly large counties was that wasn't an issue in their county because of either Dallas County's lack of any unincorporated territory to speak of, or in Tarrant where they had a different situation, where they had unincorporated areas but it wasn't that populated, or whatever it might be. And so it seemed reasonable. What I don't want to do is impose on 254 counties a solution to a problem in the biggest one. Now, it may become a problem in those larger counties as they grow into it. But what we're talking about, and I didn't want to take up, and I not succeeded, I didn't want to take up all of your time, but I noticed in Chairman Spiller's district, if you took the largest county and multiplied it by 10, it would still be well over 1 million people short of being Harris County. And so they are going to have urban problems that other places don't have. So if you're out as Harris County used to be, if you're out in an unincorporated area but it's sparsely populated and there's not that, you don't have as much crime, you don't have as much need for regular patrols. And in those days, my same neighborhoods didn't.
So let me, just so I'm not confused, you bracketed it to the large counties.
Yes.
I've got a county with 300,000. The sheriff only has 8 deputies on patrol at any one time. His focus is really the jail.
I see your
normally,
question. This does not prevent them from doing that. This gives the constable and the sheriff a statutory right that the county can't decline for them to do it. The programs that are on the books are still on the books. So if in your county they say, you know what would be a great solution that would get us more manpower, if the neighborhoods could afford or were allowed to contract with them, they'd still be permitted to do it. This bill doesn't stop anybody from doing this
So
program.
instead of contracting with a private security contractor, they could effectively contract with the
With
constable.
real police.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, let me just say, Representative Schofield, number one, thank you for reaffirming to me why I love my district. Number two, we will allow you the opportunity to close. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chair calls Terry Albritton.
Chair for gun bills.
All right.
Good morning, Chairman and members.
Morning, Mr. Albritton. We have you registered as Terry Albritton, registered as Terry Albritton on behalf of your constable with Harris County Constable Precinct 5 and testifying on behalf of yourself. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're testifying for the bill, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, if you would, go ahead.
Yes. Good morning, Constable Terry Albritton. I'm here to speak in favor of House Bill 336. This bill is important because it guarantees neighborhoods and MUD districts and other entities the right to use the contract deputy program. This program has been around for at least the past 30 years and has shown to be very effective in Harris County. My office currently services 59 patrol contracts, and that accounts for 174 deputies. When you combine the sheriff and all 8 constables, there are around 1,200 contract deputies serving in the Houston and Harris County area. Currently, if an entity wishes to contract for police services, the contract has to be approved or may be denied by Commissioners Court. The court has the authority to remove all 1,200 deputies if they choose to do so. In the past, Harris County Commissioners Court has looked at doing away with this program and placed an item on the agenda to review its merits. This brought residents from all over the county who packed the courtroom in opposition. This happens every time the court puts a similar item on the agenda that hints at doing away with the contract deputy program. It is obvious that the program is something the residents do not want taken away from them. It provides an extra layer of law enforcement that many residents are willing to pay for, and they should be allowed to do so, even if the court disagrees. I have been to homeowners association meetings in the past where residents have said that if the contract deputy program went away, they would move to somewhere outside of Harris County. Chairman, perhaps where you live. Safer place. This is not to say that the Sheriff's Department or the Houston Police Department are doing a bad job. They simply don't have the manpower to respond to calls as quickly or be as visible as a contract deputy can. Simply put, this bill says that Commissioners Court could not tell a neighborhood or utility district or entity that they cannot have the level of law enforcement presence they are willing to pay for. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Members, do you have anyone have any questions? This witness.
Yeah,
Chairman
I have a
Tepper.
question, sorry.
Go ahead.
When you contract these services, is there a standard rate?
Yes, sir. I have it if you
So
need it.
any neighborhood would be able to receive a standard rate? Does your office set the rate, or do the county commissioners? or-
Commissioners Court, by law, sets the rate.
And you go in, so there's really no negotiation. If they want a certain, is the rate by property, square foot, neighborhood,
No, it's per deputy.
per deputy?
Yeah, so that the 100% cost is currently, for fiscal year '25, is $124,100. So that number, Commissioners Court comes up with that number. And the neighborhoods currently, they contract with Commissioners Court, the way the law is written. So then the court then assigns whatever constable, sheriff, whatever the neighborhood would like to have, because they can choose between the two, to go patrol that area. And the court then approves enough positions for however much that area is willing to fund for. So we have one neighborhood on the far west side of Harris County called Bridgeland that's currently funding for 20 positions.
And that includes all the equipment, the cars, the
Yes, sir.
training, just for
That
the,
that number that the court comes up with through the budget office accounts for all the cost that deputy incurs.
okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you so much for being here, Constable Alberton. Can you talk to me about like what the contract process looks like right now and what you envision it would look like if this bill became law?
I don't know that the process would change much, except that it would allow them, if the court says no, to still get the service they're asking for. I don't know how to dig into that further, but all I see is that it would tell the court, you can no longer tell these neighborhoods, you can't have what you're willing to pay for.
You said that by statute, right now, the county commissioner court got to set the rate per deputy, is that
Yes, ma'am.
correct? Does this bill effectively change that and allow each of y'all to set your own rate?
No, because as an elected official, we have to be fiscally responsible with our budget. We know how much it costs to have a deputy. So we would not undercut that cost because it would show we're not being responsible. We would wind up with a negative budget. We've never been over budget. And now that I'm the constable, I'm ensure that we don't do that. So if we were to enter into this contract and say, we're only going to charge this neighborhood $10 for a deputy, well, that deputy's going to cost us more than $10. So we're going to wind up being over budget, and then I pay the cost for not running my department like I should.
But to be clear, right now, the Harris County Commissioners Court is setting the rate for everybody. Under this bill, y'all would be able to set your individual rates. And potentially you and the sheriff could end up with a slightly different rate?
We could, yes.
Are you-
It wouldn't make, we don't compete with that sort of thing. We all charge the same rate. So it wouldn't be beneficial to charge less. You would wind up essentially shooting yourself in the foot. You would go over budget.
Does that raise any concerns for you, either that, at some point y'all might end up in competition with each other, or that conversely, you could get some bad actors in there, not you, of course, sir, that might want to work together to raise the rate beyond the cost without as much public accountability as there is with the Commissioner's Court?
Yeah, I can't speak for others. I know our common goal is to keep these areas safe. So I don't know why someone would undercut another person. The way the county's set up, we don't currently provide any patrol services in another constable's precinct. They take care of their precinct, we take care of our precinct.
Okay. So you mentioned that Harris County Commissioner's Court has had an item on the agenda to discuss this program previously. There was a lot of public pushback. Right now, there's sort of that same process with one of these comes to court, correct, where the public could come comment on it.
Yes.
Is there that same opportunity for public engagement if these contracts come to y'all directly?
I'm trying to understand the engagement, because if they come to us directly, you mean someone opposed to it, or I'm trying to understand the question.
Potentially, yeah. If there ever was a situation where somebody was opposed, or situations where people think, potentially certain neighborhoods are getting an agreement, others aren't, concerned about dynamics, concerned about whether or not the contract terms are being followed, what would be their means of redress and public outreach if they were contracting directly with y'all?
The neighborhoods who are not, or the neighborhoods who are?
Or let's say, for example, you have two neighborhoods, you're contracted with both of them. One of them says, hey, we're not getting the service we're paying for, you're spending more time at this other neighborhood and not with us, like you said. How do they resolve that? Is there a public venue to have that conversation?
We have homeowners association meetings, we have town hall meetings, plenty of those that I attend, or someone from my staff will attend, and those questions do come up, where a neighborhood that's only paying for one deputy is next to another neighborhood that's paying for 4. And this neighborhood feels like, well, our deputy's spending too much time over there. We address those issues, and we can pull all the reports and show them, you guys are getting the level of service that you're paying for. So there's a chance for that at the, like I said, town hall meetings, HOA meetings, we'll go to any mud board meeting that we're asked to go to. It's not something anyone has to have. This is an option people are given. So it's not a forced item. So if people don't like it, they can just end the contract. Okay. But it would be silly for a neighborhood that next to it to petition against one that has it, because, like Representative Schofield said, you're getting police coverage without paying extra for it. And I'll try to explain that as best I can. If you live in a neighborhood where you're not paying for a contract deputy, and your next door neighborhood that is, well, the officer that would normally answer calls in that neighborhood is no longer answering calls in there. That neighborhood assigned contract deputies answering calls in there. It frees up the other deputy to spend more time in the other area. So these areas that are not paying are getting extra police service at no extra cost. So to argue that that's not fair, I'm getting better service at no cost, it'd be a tough argument.
Okay. Yeah, I think my concern is less any specific dynamic and more sort of what the oversight would be of this. We as a state really do prioritize, openness in contracts, openness in public action, and I'm sort of worried what it means to be devolving that to offices that don't traditionally do as much of that type of fiscal oversight and accountability work. I mean, y'all's bread and butter is policing. It's not, the legislating work of a county. So anyway, that's some of my concerns. But
it is.
Yeah.
I mean, the number here I have, we're currently $15,773,000 worth of neighborhood contracts.
Oh.
It's a huge number, and we have to budget. The county, we get our budget from Commissioner Court, but then it's our job to manage it after that. And the oversight is, like with everyone else here, we're all elected officials. You don't do your job right, you're no longer an elected official.
One would hope.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, we could talk about how effective that is all the time. But I guess one last question. You know, right now, who actually writes the contract?
The county attorney writes the contract.
Okay, is it your understanding y'all would still have the support of them to write those contracts and make
Yes.
sure the terms are consistent?
Yes,
or
I
would y'all
don't see that
have-
there would need to be any change in the way the contract's worded.
Do you read this bill as still requiring you to work with the county attorney? Because I'm not sure I do.
No, I don't think that wording's in the bill. But because the county attorney represents us, we would want them to be involved in the process.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Members, any other question? If not, Constable Albritton, thank you for your
Thank you, sir.
testimony. The chair calls Charles Reed. Thank you. And we show you, thank you for being here. We show you registered as Charles Reed as Assistant County Administrator, Dallas County Commissioners Court. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're testifying against the bill, correct?
That's correct.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you. I agree with Representative Schofield that the general tax levy should provide for law enforcement services throughout the county, including the unincorporated area. This bill, as filed, will allow a sheriff and constables enter into contracts without any consideration of the county budget, the commissioner's court, or the tax rate that has to be set on behalf of the taxpayers. There are no guardrails in this bill that would prevent a sheriff or constable from executing a $1 contract that requires 100 deputies. It simply does not exist, and I understand that elected officials are fiscally prudent. They have the taxpayers in mind, but there are no guardrails to prevent that from happening in this bill. Unfortunately, the bill would also compel the taxpayers to fund all of those resources associated with that $1 contract. As y'all know, the legislature has specifically capped the amount of property taxes allowed to be raised by a county. And so for Dallas County, we are 124 deputies away from being capped on that tax levy. So $1 contracts compelling the creation of 124 deputies would max us out. The bill would also allow for those contracts to be terminated, but the resources associated with those contracts would stay. As y'all probably remember, in 2019, the legislature passed a no defunding the police bill that compels cities and counties to not defund budgets. This bill does not consider that, and so theoretically, even if it was a cost-neutral contract, the resources associated with that contract could not be removed from the office because of the previous bill that was passed during the 2019 legislative session. Representative Zwiener, I agree with you. There is language in this bill that says that the county, all members of the county are specifically prohibited from preventing an execution of this contract, including the county attorney by my read. That would prohibit the commissioner's court or even the purchasing director or the county attorney from requiring statutorily required terms in a contract like anti-lobbying provisions, provisions that compel us from contracting with entities that boycott Israel or boycott firearms manufacturers. A glaring issue with this bill, in my estimation, is that law enforcement services is not defined at all. Could be anything, could be deputy, could be cars, could even be real property, as we saw in the 90s with a Tarrant County elected official purchasing real property using commissary funds. This would be akin to a state agency like DPS or the AG executing a contract that then compels the legislature, you all, to make an appropriation to fund that contract. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Members, any questions? All right,
Thank you.
thank you for your time. All right. The chair calls Toby Hecker. All right, thank you for being here today. And we show you registered as Toby Hecker, testifying as Assistant Chief, Harris County Constable, Precinct 4, and self, and you are testifying for the bill. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, go ahead.
I'd like to just piggyback off what Commissioner, actually not Commissioner, I'm used to the Commissioner's Court, Representative Schofield and Constable Precinct 5 that spoke to us earlier about. And that's the issue based specifically of Harris County. Harris County is just one of the 254 counties in Texas. but it's got a very unique problem that y'all are aware of that's unique to Harris County, and that's the amount of unincorporated area and the population that lives in there. It's not only the largest population of unincorporated people in Texas, it's the largest county in the United States by going by unincorporated population. So we have over 2 million, I think it's close to 2.2 million now, of people living in unincorporated Harris County. Over 1 million of those live within my district of Precinct 4. And it continues to grow and grow and grow. And the problem is, the way Texas is set up, I don't think it's really a problem. I think it's great it's set up, but it limits counties like Harris County, that we have all the big city problems without the big city funding for policemen. Counties, as you know, only get our funding from property taxes, which are maxed out. In fact, Harris County found a loophole to raise it above the limit this time because of a natural disaster of the hurricane that came through. And so we are already maxed out, as they said. We have too much money spent already. We can't raise property taxes, and that's the only form of income. If your priority isn't public safety, if your priority isn't road and bridge, if your priority isn't parks or whatever, it's going to something else. It's that same bucket of money's got to go somewhere else. And over time, like you said, our population has grown so big, it has overgrown what they can pay for. And as Representative Schofield pointed out, that this contract law enforcement isn't new. It started out in Harris County in the 80s because of a similar situation. It was growing so fast they couldn't keep up. So they found a way to do that. Not only is it only in Harris County, it's throughout Texas, but it's out throughout the country. Every state now has contract law enforcement. Our department, for instance, we contract with a few HOAs. Most of them are mud districts, water control improvement districts, school districts. In Harris County, there's several school districts that contract either with the constable's offices or the sheriff's office to be their law enforcement on the school campuses. And that's something we just want to continue, be able to have that outlet. What I like about the bill is it doesn't say you shall contract, it says you may contract. It doesn't say you have to, it just says we can. Representative Zweiner, you pointed out, what's an oversight? They may contract with the sheriff's office or with the constable's office, but it's through most of them it's through their elected board. It's through the mud district, which is an elected board, the water control improvement district, which is an elected board, the school district, which is an elected board. So if they're not happy with it, they can go somewhere else. And that's what's great about this bill is it's the sheriff's office and the constable's office. So if they're not happy with the service one's providing, they can go to the other. And I know you asked about what sets the rate. There is an existing law that says you must recoup what you spend on contract law enforcement. It actually says if you got out and I can prove that you spent $123 to cover the training, the car, the retirement, the health insurance, all that stuff, then you must recoup that amount of money. Now, where the difference comes in is like the contract. So if you say it costs this much for 100% and you're allowed to contract at 70%, you must recoup every penny of that 70% or you're violating current law. And so that's what we want to keep doing. We don't want to have, as the Dallas County pointed out, there's a 1 cent contract. You couldn't legally do that, and that wouldn't hold up in the water because you can only recoup 1 cent. So you've got to be able to recoup what you're spending on the percentage of your contract. And I don't see how we could go otherwise to do this. Now, if the county wanted to say, like we've pointed out a few times, is one of the problems, I won't say what they say, but one of the concerns they have is it's only more for the rich people to get their contract. So the rich people can afford this, the poor people can't. My comment is always is, then drop it down. You've got a 50% contract, and this entity pays 50%, the county pays 50%. Now you've got another deputy on the street, plus the one over there, like the constable said, patrolling the other area. And it increases the coverage in law enforcement, if that makes sense, what I'm trying to say in that point. It allows us to go to the schools, to have someone, as the representative said, that knows the kids in the schools, that knows who's supposed to be on your house, who recognizes those people that aren't supposed to be on your house and are there to take advantage of your community. And the grand thing about having that 70% contract is you're here 70% of the time, but they have what we call a halo effect that covers the other section around it. So you may be here for this point, the other 30% of the time you're out here in this neighborhood, in this neighborhood, in this neighborhood. And we have more than half of our contracts, which we have a little over 100 contracts just in our precinct alone. And as I pointed out, there's over 1,200 deputies on the street. But it allows them also to focus on these other areas that are quote unquote underserved. We have very few contracts that you would say are upper middle class and above. We do have some, but the vast majority of them are below that, going by their zip code, by their income. And with that, I'd like to answer any questions you might have or concerns.
Members, you have any questions? Representative Lena.
Thank you so much, Chair Spiller, and thank you, Constable, or I'm sorry, your Assistant Chief. I
Correct.
Get the title correct. So thank you for being here today. And I think the question I'm still sort of struggling with is, why isn't this being achieved through the normal tax process? Why, if there's such wide political support for this in the communities, why do we not just see the tax rate coming up to fund this
Very good
service?
question, but the tax rate's maxed out. And depending on what, like Harris County is a population of 4.8 million people. Depending on what the 5 commissioners at that point think are important, that's where the money goes. Now, in a great world, like you said, if you're not a great politician, they got let you out. I could tell by your answer that doesn't always happen, correct? And so without being able to raise the tax base, and I can guarantee they'd love nothing more than to raise the tax base to pay for the stuff that they need to, but it's maxed out. Like the city,
And I'm sorry,
the big
maxed out
cities,
under,
maxed out by what the state allows to raise your property tax. Yeah.
so it's
Like-
a state barrier to them being able to raise
Correct,
more, to pay
correct.
more.
Yep, and like the cities, they get their own sales tax, they get other fees and levies that they can put towards that, and therefore they can have more money coming in. Like I said, we have the big city police problem in Harris County, and especially in unincorporated Harris County, but we don't have the big city funding for those law enforcement officers that are there. Like I said, the only way they have money to fund them is through property taxes, which must also pay for everything else. Now, going through these contracts, specifically with the mud districts and things, they're able to write in there, security fund, security this for that, and it not only covers the houses, but it will cover the property districts that are in there. And so they have more tax money coming into them that they can spend on public safety. And so that's where a lot of this stuff comes from, are from other taxing entities that have that income coming in, and then they contract with law enforcement to have extra people within their geographical boundary in that mud district or that school district or that water control improvement district.
So are these contracts effectively functioning as kind of a backdoor tax on these unincorporated communities?
I wouldn't say a backdoor tax because they know exactly what they're doing and they want to get into it. They're not, no one's, like I said, no one's forced. It doesn't say you shall, it says they may. And the want in Harris County is so big. We have to tell people no every year because we don't have the infrastructure to do it. We don't have enough cars. We don't have enough deputies. We don't have enough people and things that we need to do this. So every year we got to tell people we can't do this. Let's wait another year. We can get some people hired and trained, and then we can go into it another year later. The demand is so great that, like I said, we have to tell people no, which is a terrible thing when they're coming to you, asking you to please come into our neighborhood. We've grown so big, crime is starting to big, and we don't see the police officers. We want you to come in here. And so what we do is we tell them we can't, but we have that 30% that we can't otherwise, and this neighborhood next to you has that. They have 2 or 3 deputies there, 70% spent there. We'll have the other 30% going around to these neighborhoods that can't have it. And then they see that difference. They say, wow, we see the policemen there. We want our own now.
And thank you for that. And just to come back to the question of maybe pitting folks against each other, you know, I want y'all to know that concern sort of isn't coming from nowhere. It's actually something I've heard from some of my North Texas colleagues.
Correct.
That they have, you know, new MUDs coming in and sort of pitting cities against each other for who will contract to do those emergency services.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, you know, would you, as I read this bill, it puts every single one of the constable offices and the sheriff at liberty to do their own terms and all potentially differentiate from each other. Are you concerned about that?
No, because you can say do your own terms, but you have to, like I said, there's already a law in the books. You have to recoup your price.
But despite that, you know, we have stories from North Texas, Denton County of cities pitting against each other.
Putting
to
things like
contract
trying
with
to
MUDs.
get that contract because they're bidding against each other. You can, but this law enforcement isn't a for-profit business. And so we will never enter into a contract that says, okay, you're going to pay us $1 million, but we're only going to give you $800,000 worth of services. Just as we can't say we're going to enter into a contract for $600,000, but we're going to give you $800,000 worth of services. It's got to, every year, we have to break even. We do the line item budget, we have to break even to what it is. And I understand, like you say, pitting, but it's not the private sector. You're not, okay, well, I can do the same services, I can hire him to do this for $10,000 less. In Harris County, we have pay equity between all law enforcement. So whether you're with the constables or the sheriffs, everybody makes exactly the same penny for penny because you're out there doing the same job. So there's no way for my agency to go against Precinct 5's agency or the sheriff's office agency saying we can do it for less, because we can't. Because our cars coming from Harris County, our tasers are coming from Harris County, our vests are coming from Harris County, our body cameras are coming from Harris County, and those prices are set. It's through a contract through the county as in general. Our uniforms, everything comes from the same place. Even our computer-aided dispatch system, our dispatch centers, all comes from the same place.
Your contracts with the neighborhoods are all coming from the same place.
Correct. You mean like from different entities in the neighborhood?
from the
That's
commissioner's
why the
court.
price should be the same. Now, ideally, like I said, I agree. I wish everything was covered by taxes. I wish we didn't have to do that. But the reality is, we do. And like you said, the priorities. One of y'all brought up about a bill that was passed a few years ago about not being able to defund the police. I think that was the Dallas County one. That was brought up because people were trying to defund the police, and Texas said, no, we're not going to do that. This is the backdoor way in Harris County. Like I said, there's 1,200 plus patrol deputies on the street. If Harris County had to say, okay, we can't do that, we've got to fund these now, that's $147 million that they have to come up with and fund 100%, which right now, on average, they're probably paying about 26% because there's different levels of contracts. So they have to come up with all that difference. And if your goal is to defund the police, this avenue was shut down, let's try this avenue. Like I said, we hope this never has to happen. I would love for us to never have to enter into a contract, us alone, always going through commissioner's court. But we've seen in the past where we have issues with that, and we'd love to get ahead of it. Before they start saying you can't have contract deputies, you can't do this, you can't do that, we'd love to be able to say, we don't want to do this. We want to stay exactly what you're telling us because this is what the price is. We know what it is. But if you don't, we have the opportunity to do this because this is best for our constituents, for our elected officials, for the people that live in here in Harris County, and for me and my family because we live in Harris County. And I live in a contracted area because I know the difference. I moved into the house I'm in now a few years back, which was one of our contracts. Before that was with the sheriff's office. And I, unfortunately, you had to do that because it's, you know the difference. You know, if you don't live one of those contracts because the numbers are short and small, you may see a deputy drive through your neighborhood, maybe once a month, if you're lucky and you happen to be awake as they drive by at that time. And it's not law enforcement's fault. There's just not enough out there, and they're being put onto, okay, we have this many district units. We need them to investigate the homicides. We need them to investigate the robberies. We need them to do this, and that pulls people off. I'm sure you're all familiar with the overcrowding problems that they have in the jail in Harris County. They have to pull people off the street to be in the jail because there's set standards they have to do and hope they have enough people there. They don't have to spend all the extra tax money to send them out of state to different places. And that pulls people off the streets. And so this is just a way to subsidize that if the elected boards from, like I said, the MUD districts and the school districts want to do that. It gives them the opportunity. So again, it doesn't say you shall, it just says you may.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? All right. Thank you for your testimony here today. Appreciate it. The chair calls Aaron Taliaferro. I apologize.
I got offended every time someone said my last name wrong. I'd have pretty thin skin, sir.
All right, great. Thank you for being here today. We show you registered as Aaron, I'll let you pronounce it.
Tolliver, actually.
Tolliver, there
But
we
you'd
go.
never get that.
All right. Aaron Tolliver, testifying as Director of Government Relations for Tarrant County Administrator's Office. Is that
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And you're testifying against the bill, correct?
Yes, sir, that's
All
correct.
right, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this time and committee members. So last week, Mr. Schofield and members of his staff generously gave me their time. So I'm not here to speak against his intentions or his motivation. I certainly understand where he's coming from, and I don't question that. However, the language in the bill says, the court may not prohibit or otherwise restrict constables or sheriffs from entering into contracts under this section. Our view in Tarrant County is that we don't have the problems he's bringing up, problems I certainly understand, and this presents or possibly would create a divisive relationship in our own county, which doesn't currently exist. In Tarrant County today, the Sheriff's Department has authority in the budget to provide policing for all of the unincorporated areas, and they can, and they do, enter into contracts with certain municipalities who don't want to provide their own police forces. So the Sheriff's Department has a contract with Edgecliff Village, and the Sheriff's Department has a contract with Haltom City. Our constables in Tarrant County are almost exclusively working for the JP courts, right? They don't do patrolling like the constables in Harris County do, so we have a different relationship there. So the language in the bill that says you may not prohibit or otherwise restrict constables, we believe then creates an inappropriate consolidation of power. As it is right now, the sheriff is the executive of law enforcement in the county. That's his responsibility. He comes up, he proposes a budget, the budget office reviews it, goes through the planning with the sheriff's department, proposes the budget to the commissioner's court, the commissioner's court approves the budget is allocated to the sheriff. If the sheriff's office wants to enter into contracts of any kind, they may do so, but those contracts are going to be reviewed by our audit department. The audit department has ultimate authority to say, okay, yes, the terms of the contract are acceptable. So that's a check and a balance against the sheriff's department, just as there's a check and a balance against every department in the county, whether it's public health or transportation or fleet services, because we have a contracting office and a purchasing agent under the audit office. That gets checked against the budget office. The budget's like, did we plan and budget for this? Was it in your plan and budget at the start of the year? Yes. So it's a good relationship of checks and balances, a division and a separation of power between executive fiduciary authority. It's a good relationship. This creates the opportunity, I believe, for abuse in the future because it centralizes power in an executive agency of county government. It just creates a potential for an abusive or a divisive relationship that doesn't exist today. It also would incentivize our constables to say, hey, gosh, we can get in the law enforcement business. Now, they are law enforcement officers, but that's not really the work they do in Tarrant County. So, again, I understand where Mr. Schofield is coming from. I appreciated his time last week. I don't speak against his intentions or motivations, but that's just the position of Tarrant County. Thank you, sir. Happy to answer any questions any members may have.
I've got a couple questions.
Yes,
So
sir.
what is the population of Tarrant County?
Approximately 2.3 million.
All right, so currently, you would be subject, in its present bracket, you would be subject to this.
Yes,
under
sir.
This bill.
That's
All right.
correct.
But you, and we're going to ask Representative Schofield later, but he had said, I think in his layout, that he contemplated or had considered moving that bracket up.
Yes, sir, I heard that.
So certainly, that would be your preference if he were to do that, I'm assuming.
Yes, sir.
All right, but, okay. Members, any questions?
So
Chairman Kepler.
otherwise, besides the bracket, you would have no issue with the bill or how the system is operated?
Well, I'm not here to get into Harris County's business. As I said, I understand where they're coming from. I
Neither
understand
are
their
we,
motive.
but
Yeah.
every other bill is about Harris County, it seems.
That's fair enough, but I'm not here with the authority to speak on what I think of Harris County. So I would not want to do that, sir.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank
for
you,
being
sir.
here. All right. The chair calls Trey Larry. All right, Mr. Larry, we show you as registered Trey Larry, attorney with Allen Boone Humphreys Robinson LLP, testifying for the bill. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, go ahead.
Good morning. I'm testifying as a customer of this program. My law firm represents a lot of water districts around the state, particularly municipal utility districts, in offices in Houston and Dallas and Austin. We particularly represent a lot of districts in Harris County and particularly in Representative Schofield's district. And just to reiterate some of the things he's talked about the unique nature of Harris and surrounding counties, it's not a problem. It is unique. And there are more people living in unincorporated areas around Houston than do live in Houston. Unincorporated would be the fourth largest city right now, going on third. And Representative Zwiener, there's several reasons why those areas don't incorporate, including the one that Representative Schofield mentioned. Number one, at least half of them pay less property tax in their current situation than if they annexed into Houston. So they are not interested in annexing and creating higher property taxes for themselves. Number two, there's a local neighborhood aspect of it. They enjoy being governed in their own neighborhood rather than by a city hall. Number three, annexation law very much requires absolutely consent and requires elections and things like that, that it's not as easy to annex territory into cities. But even the communities that have considered incorporation elections, those elections are failing. So the Woodlands has gone through a huge campaign, an effort to consider incorporation several times over the years, and it fails because they like their current model better. And in that current model, they pay for the services they use. The MUD provides them with water, sewer, and drainage services, and then they get services from the county. The county is set up not to do neighborhood patrol, but to do larger countywide patrol. If those residents were in a city, they would pay a city property tax, and that city property tax would fund a city police department. The neighborhoods in the unincorporated areas don't have a city police department, so they fund one through their MUD. They pay taxes and fees to the MUD, and the MUD hires the sheriffs or the constables. So this is just the way that those unincorporated areas of Harris, Fort Bend, Montgomery, all the surrounding counties, this is how they offer public safety services on a neighborhood level that the county isn't set up to offer. Happy to answer any questions.
Let me ask a few, if you don't mind. First of all, and your firm does quite a few, do a lot of, represent a lot of clients in development work also as far as MUDs, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And so when you talk about water districts, you're really talking about MUDs, municipal utility districts in Harris County and, of course, around the state as well.
Yes, sir, and others that serve the same function. There's a whole alphabet soup out there, but yes.
Okay. And currently, these MUDs, currently, are the MUDs the ones that are contracting? I know that that's anticipated under this, but they're currently doing this now.
They are in very large numbers. I think Representative Schofield and the constables talked about other entities like HOAs and POAs and other groups. But I have numbers from a Kinder report from 2017, 2018, and just the MUD piece at that time was funding $61 million to Harris County for over 800 peace officers under about 300 contracts with the MUD. For that program to go away would be absolutely devastating.
All right. And so under the current set, and I'm assuming most of these MUDs follow what the basic template is, which I think you've been involved in
Yes,
over
sir.
the years in developing that, and what we now kind of understand that to be. Under that basic template, and when these MUDs are established, and I know that they're designed for water, sewer, drainage, but you're saying that they're collecting taxes and fees, and you're using those funds or those excess funds that they're levying that tax and those fees for to contract for law enforcement. My first question is, are they authorized to do that? Is that like an ultra vires issue, or do they have the authority to collect for those things outside of water and sewer and drainage?
Yes, sir. The MUDs are limited government entities, so they only have the power that the legislature gives them. But the legislature does specify the capital improvements that the MUD can build and then some of the additional services it can provide. And MUDs have very clear statutory authority and have for a while now to provide peace officers, to engage in fire protection, and to largely to contract with ESDs or volunteer fire departments or neighboring cities for fire service. And then MUDs throughout the state engage in some park efforts, but in certain counties that the legislature in its wisdom deemed those counties that they can do more park funding. That does apply in the Harris County region, and it's part of why Representative Schofield's district is so green and full of parks and trees, is because the MUDs are able to provide them there.
I thought it was just because he was such a great representative and made sure that those things happened.
I'd make a comment about his hair, but I would
what-
be in a bad.
So if the MUDs are able to do this now, why is this bill, in your view, necessary to take this other step? Because we've heard some criticisms of it today, that it might have some unintended consequences. is it still, is it your view, I know you're testifying for the bill, is it necessary to amend the law from what we currently have in place that's providing the contracts for this law enforcement?
Most of the concerns I heard were as it might relate to other urban counties, and I understand with the bracket, maybe those would be resolved. Right now, the MUDs are able to get those contracts through the county commissioner's court, and they're absolutely necessary. There has been discussion that that might stop, and then I don't know pure numbers, but I'm just imagining that it would take half of the law enforcement off the streets of the county in one fell swoop. It would just be devastating.
Okay, all right. Members, thank you. Members, any questions? Any other questions? All right, thank you for your
Thank
testimony
you.
here today. Appreciate it. Chair calls Adam Haynes.
Sir, he's still over in Senate.
He
over in
is.
the Senate committee here. He's still hung up over there.
All right, we have him shown as registering as the policy director for Conference of Urban Counties and registering against the bill. Is there anyone else who wants to testify on, for, or against this bill? If not, we'd call on Representative Schofield to close on this bill.
Mr. Chairman, forgive me if I said this on my opening, but it was Lieutenant Governor Bob Bullock's practice when one of these bills came up to say the Texas Senate will adjourn and the Houston City Council will now come to order. And I apologize if that's necessary, but we're talking about public safety for 2 million people who won't otherwise get it. I do want to point out that we had some folks from Dallas County and Tarrant, and there have been some other counties that came by my office, and they were very gracious in discussing their concerns about the bill with me. And that's why I mentioned on the opening that we would certainly visit taking the bracket up to 3.3 million, which is the standard one for what we're aiming at. And I think that's important. There are a couple of points that I wanted to make with response to Ms. Zwiener's stuff. When you talked about North Texas having the potential for the MUDs and whatever to fight with each other over it, remember, this is not a new program. We've been doing this in Harris County since the 1980s. We've never had that problem. We've never had the problem with either the MUDs or the HOAs having to compete with each other for constables. We've also, the whole time, had the sheriffs and the constables both able to enter into the contracts. And one of the reasons why I thought this would be the solution to it, to lock in the program rather than to try to find some other way to assure that we would have public safety, is that an entity, whether it's the Homeowners Association or the MUD, that isn't happy with its contract is free to break it and go contract with the other. And what neither of the constables testified to was the contracts are annual contracts, but the entity can get out of them on 30 days' notice. And in the past there was a period of time where some of the northeast in Constable 4's area, I believe, neighborhoods weren't happy with their contract with the sheriff. They got out of them and went into a contract with the constables because they felt they would get better coverage. With respect to the money and all of that, again, this is not, the bill doesn't create a new program. The bill refers, and I believe the program is in Chapter 351 of the Local Government Code. It exists already. And we've been doing it for a long time. The only difference is the county has been able to stop you from doing it. They said before, they always showed the sense not to. But now I've got to make sure I can guarantee law enforcement for these folks. The question was, well, what would be the backstop? The backstop is the entity entering into the contract. If they feel like they're not getting their money's worth out of the contract, they'll get out of it and go with the other entity. You can't overprice because they'll quit. You can't underprice because, number one, the law won't allow you to, and secondly, you could never pay for the program if you underpriced. So price really isn't an issue. I think the best auditor of these programs is the actual entities entering into them. If they're bad contracts, they won't be doing them anymore. And I apologize for taking up so much of your time this morning, but this is my most important bill, not only of this session, but of several sessions. I've got to protect 2 million people in Harris County. And members, I appreciate your time, and with that, I close pending any questions.
I would just say thank you. obviously it's a very important issue. I would encourage you to work with those folks that then in the other counties that this doesn't affect and might have some unintended consequences to try to work with them, especially in that bracket issue, if you could do that. And just the obvious observation is it's frustrating to me to realize that these people are paying taxes for that police coverage, law enforcement coverage, just like everyone else is, and yet they're having to pay extra and use this program to get it, and that's unfortunate.
Mr. Chairman, when I first heard of the program, I hated it because I said, you are paying taxes for that purpose. At the same time, they were starting to build toll roads in my part of the county. When the southeastern part of the county, which developed first, was developing, we paid for roads. My people paid for them too. Then when my folks start developing, we have to pay for roads, we have to pay for police. But I can promise you this, I've been in office for 10 years. I have never once heard anybody in my district complain about their contract. They're all happy they have them. And that, yes, they would rather the taxes covered it, but the idea that they could pay for a beat cop who will know who they are is just priceless to these people.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and
All
I
right.
close.
Members, any other questions? Representative Blow.
So thank you for your closing remarks. So Tarrant County felt so compelled to send somebody all the way here, my county, and oppose this. The man said that Harris County is a lot different than Tarrant County. We have different problems, different solutions. So should we actually do this statewide, or should we allow the counties to go ahead and decide this for themselves?
Well, remember, the current law is statewide, so Tarrant County could enter into these if they need to. As Tarrant explained to me, and of course it's true, they have a different situation in their unincorporated areas than Harris does. Dallas has a completely different situation, which is they have almost no unincorporated areas. If Dallas's unincorporated areas ballooned in population, it would mean you're stacking them on top of each other, and then you would have a situation where you need this. At the end of the day, it's our responsibility to make sure that people have some public safety coverage. We tend to try to do that by pushing these things down to a local level. The state, state constitution creates the counties, but they have almost no ordinance-making authority because we haven't chosen to give it to them. The cities do because we've given them the opportunity to enter into home rule charters if they're over a certain size, and the legislature has chosen to give them that authority. As I've often said in committee, if you violate a power that we've given you, we will take it away. And if you start trying to make it so these people cannot have any police coverage, we are going to have to step in and say you can't do that anymore. And one final thing that I would want to say, other than the fact that because I've kept all these members waiting so long, I'm going to have to vote for all their bills now, is that when we talk about these constables, and I think Representative Zwiener said, well, you don't have budget people. Yes, they do. These are big agencies because they've had to become big agencies. Constable Precinct 4 has over 1 million people in their area, and they do have budget folks online, and they do have people that look after their money. They have all those processes in place, but the number one process that will determine the fairness of these contracts is the neighborhoods entering into them saying, I'm not doing it if I don't see the patrols I paid for. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hearing this bill. And I really do, this is not a pro forma thing. First of all, I didn't file it for the constables. I wrote it and then told them about it. This is a public safety crisis in not only my district, but in about 12 districts in the northern and western part of Harris County. And we are in desperate need of your help moving this bill.
Anyone else? All right. Representative Sweener.
Thank you, Chairman. Since Rep. Schofield called me out by name. No, I just to clarify, Rep. Schofield, my concern isn't that they don't have budget folks. It's sort of those various public accountability roles that the court itself plays, the county attorney. I mean, just all of those different roles in contracting and procurement. I have questions about if that side of the office is as built up and if they're ready to take on those services. Because
Remember-
as I read your bill, they don't have to work through the county attorney like they said they intended to.
And remember, the difference is, this is not, we all pay tax money and then they enter into contracts with third parties where you really want to make sure. This is, I'm entering into a contract directly with you, It's you and me. And if I don't like the service I'm getting for the amount of money I'm paying, I'm out. And that is the most direct accountability you can possibly have. If the people in this neighborhood say, we're paying for 3 deputies and we're not seeing 3 deputies, you're taking our money and spending it elsewhere, they're going to be out of there.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. The chair moves to leave House Bill 336 pending. Is there any objection? Hearing none, House Bill 336 is left pending. The chair lays out House Bill 1033 and recognizes Representative Morales